Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and a look at my no frill sweater from PetiteKnit. So this is not my first no frill sweater from PetiteKnit. It's actually my third one. I have my first two here just to show you. So the first one I did with a hand painted yarn held with a mohair. And then the second one I just did in sort of like a flat color held with the mohair as well. And I really do love both of these sweaters. But for this one, I wanted to try out again another or more of that melange technique that I had previously used using her Marseille sweater pattern. So the melange technique involves holding two yarns together. And so you get sort of this randomized look of different color flecks and going on like that. So the last time I used this technique, I used two tonal yarns, and I really felt like I didn't get to see that sort of like static effect because the tonal yarns sort of blended in together and it ended up looking sort of more like variegated than the melange, which I was going for. So for this time, I used the no frill sweater as my pattern base, just because it's a very simple, basic sweater. There's not a lot going on, so you can sort of play around with the yarn that you're using. I've chosen two yarns in the palette line from Knit Picks. So I have the brown sugar colorway and tranquil, the other colorway I used. My idea when picking out these yarns is I kind of wanted something that looked like a patina on copper. I don't know if that's entirely successful with my finished sweater, but I liked the idea behind it and I liked what I came up with. It's definitely not a color combination that I necessarily have seen before, so I felt like that was fun and new and unique. So this is a Peruvian Highland wool. It's not as sort of like soft and next to skin as like a merino would be, but I find it perfectly fine, especially after wet blocking. It seems to have softened up a lot. When I was making it, it seemed like a really dense fabric that seems to have sort of released a little bit, but it is certainly a nice and warm fabric because of those two yarns held together. So I did find, even though that these are finger and weight, when I held them together, my gauge was a little bit bigger than a DK. So I did drop down my needle sizes a couple of sizes of needles just so that I was getting a tighter gauge. Again, that's probably another reason why I have such a thick, dense fabric that's really, really warm. In terms of sizing, I tried to stay true to size using the size medium, which is what is called for by my measurements. I did make some changes to it. I cropped it quite significantly to sort of like just below my waist, which I liked the look of. The other thing that I did to make some changes with this is I added some short rows along the back hem right here, just because I find with cropped sweaters, I'm much more prone to that sort of like plumber's crack look. So I'd like to add a little extra length in the back. I added an extra 1.5 inches, but you can see here that it's still kind of a little short. I wish it was just a little bit longer in the back. It is a quite oversized pattern, as are most of hers. And I think that that's something I just need to reconcile in my head, that if I use the pattern for my size, it's going to be big. For the cast on this, I did go ahead and use the Italian cast on. I've used it, I think this is probably the third time I've used it. And every time I do it, it gets much easier. And I think it looks a lot cleaner. So I'm really happy that I have that cast on in my arsenal now, especially when I'm starting on a neckline or starting on some ribbing, because I think it gives a nice clean finish that you can't get with like long tail or German cast on or something like that. And it works very seamlessly with an Italian bind off, which is my favorite bind off to do for the sleeves and the bottom of the garment. So as I said, this is the third time I've made the no frills sweater, but it's the first time that I used the decrease or the increases that are suggested. So the pattern has you do make one increases. And on all my other times I've made the sweater, I've just done KFBs because I find them a lot easier to do than make ones. But I decided to go ahead and stick with the make ones. And I actually kind of like how it turned out. It gives you like a very definitive line or row column of stitches, of knit stitches in there that like looks kind of neat. And it definitely looks different than my KFB raglan stitches. So it's nice to see the difference in how that affects things. In terms of quantities of yarn, I bought 5 of each of these colors and I have this much left. Even though these are the same exact yarns, I did find that my brown sugar consistently ran out before my tranquil ran out. So they're not consistent in yardages. So as I had said, this is a fingering weight yarn. It's about 230 yards for a 50-gram skein, which is pretty standard for a fingering weight yarn. But it is a 2-ply with a little bit more. It's not as rustic as, say, like Lopi, but it's not as soft as merino.